Well, with just 29 days to go until Joe Biden is inaugurated, there is new reporting that the current administration is doing as little as possible to help with a peaceful transition. The Washington Post reports that in the final weeks, the White House is trying to do everything it can to reshape the government with last-minute policy changes and political appointments. The newly installed defense secretary, a Trump loyalist, has stopped briefing the transition team, calling it a holiday break. The Biden team says it never agreed to this, adding the move will, quote, have consequences well beyond January. Trump is also reportedly telling advisors not to share information with Biden's team that could be used against him. And with his possible run for office, he's already looking to begin, at least informally, working behind the scenes. Let's bring in Ann Gearan of the Washington Post, who's been talking about this and reporting on this. And Ann, what do you think the most destructive thing that they are not helping with is in terms of the transition?
Well, Mika, it's actually something that's hard to see, which is the sort of mid-level and lower-level government workings. The Biden team remains sort of blinded to a lot of what's actually happening in government, and some certainly who are advising President-elect Biden are concerned that there's a whole lot of shenanigans going on behind the scenes, deep in government agencies, where the Trump folks are either placing loyalists now or, doing their version of burning documents. We don't actually think they're burning documents, but they may be, kind of moving things around, making it difficult for the Biden folks to get traction once they get in, making it doubly difficult for the Biden team to understand and know all that Trump left in place when he left in terms of policies, changes, hollowing out of agencies. So it's less overt than a number of the things that the president tweets about the transition, but it could be deeply damaging going forward.
Mike Barnicle, you are in contact with the Biden team on a daily basis. You obviously said they were expressing concern several weeks ago, mainly about getting the vaccine out to as many Americans as possible. How are they, as we move toward this holiday break, how are they feeling about the transition right now? What are their overriding concerns?
Well, I think Ian just pointed out one of their overriding concerns, if not the overriding concern, Joe. In addition to the logistics of getting the vaccine distributed across the country, there is the increasing worry about how much damage is intentionally being done within the administration and various departments of government within the administration. What are they doing on an intentional basis to slowly and surely hurt the Biden presidency before Joe Biden is even sworn in on January 20th? They've already done some damage, but they continue to do damage. They feel, the incoming Biden administration feels, incoming damage on a daily and hourly basis. So, Ann, my question to you is, it's clearly, the talent pool around the White House has historically been very thin for the last 3 or 4 years. Who is left around Donald Trump to provide either advice, counsel, or maybe as an accomplice?
Well, I'll let you decide who's who in that cast. But certainly Mark Meadows is in there just about every day. Rudy Giuliani is in there just about every day. He's not a government employee, or he's on the phone with the president. The president's circle is really becoming smaller and smaller as his days dwindle in office. There are really only a few people who he talks to every day, and we're not seeing much of the president. This is a different President Trump, kind of going out the door here. He's been really rejecting the advice of some of his political aides to go out and do a valedictory tour. Give the people what they want is what the president is being told. And instead, he's holed up and inside the White House, talking about how he can get senators to do his bidding when it comes for the Electoral College vote, certifying the vote, which is, as Senator Thune pointed out, a fool's errand to begin with. But the president seems to want to do it. And he's not tweeting. He's tweeting, but he's not showing up in the briefing room. He's not actually really announcing policy or doing anything with those tweets, except airing grievances. And so we're all sort of waiting to see when he comes out of the bunker.
Thanks for checking out MSNBC on YouTube, and make sure you subscribe to stay up to date on the day's biggest stories. And you can click on any of the videos around us to watch more from Morning Joe and MSNBC. Thanks so much for watching.